Hi, this is Edward Funk, and it's podcast 89. The title is There Was a Reason Why Loretta Young's Love Scenes with Jeff Chandler Were So Hot. Now, before we get to Chandler, Loretta discusses another reason why she was motivated to get into television. She wanted to create a situation where Tom could have another fresh start. That's her husband. And in doing so, save a marriage that was becoming more and more fragile. But if you've been listening to all these podcasts, that fragility's been going on for 7 years. Anyway, however, the transition was going to take some time, and until the deals could work out, Loretta continued to make movies. Now, Because of You was next. She played a dope peddler's mall, sent to prison as an accessory. While serving time, she became a nurse. And then later, marries without telling her wealthy husband about her past life. Only after they have a daughter does her past come back to haunt her. Now, this would be Loretta's first film for Universal since she was a child extra. Her attraction to Universal was that the old friend Bill Gates, who now was running the studio, uh, in negotiations with the studio, Loretta asked that the Deanna Durbin bungalow be made available to her. I don't, for those of you who don't know who Deanna Durbin was, in the same way Shirley Temple uh, saved 20th Century Fox, and she had her own bungalow on that lot as opposed to just a regular dressing room. Same was true over at Universal with Deanna Durbin. She saved that studio. So Loretta's saying she wants that Deanna Durbin bungalow because the room carried a certain status. It told the whole studio what the boss thought of whoever was using it. Jeff Chandler was Loretta's leading man in Because of You. He was 6'4", 210 pounds, and with a chiseled good looks, Chandler was fast becoming a 50s heartthrob. He was 5 years younger than Loretta. She found Jeff Chandler to be very attractive, and apparently the feelings were reciprocal. She recalled, "We'd been rehearsing a couple days, and I started to go to my dressing room, and Jeff said, 'May I walk out to your bungalow with you?' I said, 'Well, sure, I'd be delighted.' So we were walking out, and he said, 'I have to tell you something. I don't understand what's happening, but I think I'm falling in love with you.' I got very flustered, very flustered. I said, 'Oh, that's not necessarily bad.' The minute it came out of my mouth, he kind of looked at me and said, 'No.' And then I said, 'No, well, I didn't really mean that exactly.' He said, 'Well, what did you mean?' I didn't know how to put it. What I meant was, well, it was all right because it would help with what would come over on the screen. But at the same time, I'm married and you're married and nothing could ever come of it. Anyway, so it's not so terrible, but keep it that way. Anyway, once you even admit anything like that, it makes it a little more difficult, but it makes for very nice love scenes. Loretta theorized, it's easy for a woman to be a faithful wife if she's in a happy marriage. But if she's unhappily married and she's at all attractive, it's very difficult. Very. I managed in my marriage, but believe me, it was no picnic. I learned very quickly that you don't even hold hands. You don't even smile too long at each other. And you certainly don't kiss each other because the next thing you know, you slipped into the euphoric state of sheer bliss where nothing else matters. Now, Loretta's distinct advantage was to be an actress. She laughingly said I could kiss Jeff Chandler while the cameras were rolling and actually get paid for it. Even with innocent kisses, I was deeply touched by Jeff's nearness and his sensitivity, and of course, his masculinity. Loretta knew that she was playing with fire. She reflected, Jeff never so much as held my hand outside of those scenes. But I think until he died, we both felt it. If I'd see him on the street, I'd walk the other way because I didn't want to spark anything. I said to him, Jeff, we're just bad news for each other. So wave at me across the room, but don't come near me. I think that he was at our house a couple times at big parties because I didn't want to penalize him in that way. His wife was charming, and I don't think she ever knew that about my crush or our crush. Because of You is a sleeper hit, a film that performs way beyond expectations and was held over a couple weeks at the Roxy Theater in New York. A New York Times reviewer must have sensed the attraction between the two stars. He wrote, Jeff Chandler and Loretta Young make a fine romantic team. Sex angle is introduced with unusual prominence and played for all that it's worth. Miss Young is an eyeful and an expert in the clinches. The other thing I would add is they might have given them Tony Bennett, but it became the song "Because of You" became a very popular song, and uh, that helped to promote the movie as well. Now, here's my voice. What I find interesting about Loretta's caution about Jeff Chandler is that it's such a different story from when she had crushes on married men before she herself was married. Just name them: Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, Jock Whitney. Her attitude about those situations is that you can't help how you feel, so their alienation of affections toward their wives in favor of Loretta was okay. But now she was married. She tells Jeff Chandler not to even cross the street to be with her. And for a little psychobabble here on my part, does Loretta's need to have the attention of every man in the room traceable to her dad abandoning her when she was age 4? I asked Loretta about this theory, but she dismissed it because she never wanted to acknowledge that her father had that kind of influence in her life. Loretta's second picture for Universal is It Happens Every Thursday. John Forsythe, who many of you will know from the TV series Dynasty, and he was also the voice for the show Charlie's Angels. But anyway, he was a newcomer to film, uh, and he co-starred with Loretta. Loretta remembered working with John Forsythe. He was cute and very sweet, and he wasn't real clear on what kind of picture we were doing. I remember one day we were doing a scene, and I was sitting on his lap, and I was laughing about something. When we were through, he said, You know something? I think I'm the only person on the set that doesn't know this picture is a comedy. I said, That's right, you and the producer. The producer was Anton Leader, who produced a radio show, Suspense, and he wanted more drama. Joe Pevney, who was directing, and he agreed with me, saying, I think we're taking ourselves way too seriously. We got to one scene that was all charged with drama, and I said, Sorry, I really can't do this seriously. It was noontime, so I went over to Bill Getz's office. Again, he's the president of International, and said, Bill, you make 50 pictures a year, so you can afford one or two duds. I really can't. This is a very nice little picture, but it's not a drama. If anything, it's kind of a sweet family comedy. You're going to have to get a comedy writer around here someplace, or you can stop and get somebody else to do this picture because I can't go ahead with it as it is. He said, I've been watching the rushes, and I agree. Give me some time. Bill called me in my dressing room after lunch. He said, Now, there's a young man. Um, Wait a minute, wrong page. There's a young man on the lot by the name of Dick Moore. He's quite a good writer. If you stay there, he'll be over in your dressing room in about 20 minutes. I asked that director and the producer to come over as well. So we were sitting around, and this kid wearing white bucks and a white t-shirt comes in. He had blonde hair and looked about 25. I thought, oh boy, he's too young to know anything. Anyway, we sat around and got out. He got out his little pad of paper and all talked, and he made notes. We talked about 2 hours, and he hadn't opened his mouth. Finally, he said, "I have to think about it." It's about 3 in the afternoon, and the producer said, "Well, we might as well go home." About 7:30 the next morning, I was in my dressing room, and they came in with some pink sheets reflecting the latest changes. There were a couple scenes we were supposed to shoot that day, and they were good. They're not hilarious, but at least they had a light touch and some humor. I got a call from Bill Gates' secretary. "Mr. Gates wants to know if the rewrites are acceptable to you." I said, "Yeah, they are. Um, at least I can do them." He put Dick Morse on the project, and he just rewrote all the scenes. When we were through, I thanked him. The picture didn't really do anything big, but it didn't break anybody, didn't lose money, and at least I wasn't embarrassed by it. So it happened every Thursday. It was a rather inglorious ending to a film career of 98 movies and that spanned a period of 36 years. A career that reached back practically to the beginning of Hollywood movies and then rode the crest through the peak of the 30s and mid 40s. Loretta personally reached her zenith in films from the mid 40s to 1950. As the industry, at that same period, the industry was waning in the wake of a changing world and the advent of television. In the early 50s, Because of You was Loretta's only major hit. Audiences were changed, and so were their tastes. Were producers shying away from Loretta for another reason? Now, Murray Boland thought so. He's a guy that worked with Tom Lewis at Rubicon, Young and Rubicon, back in the 30s, and he also worked with Loretta on radio shows when she guest appeared in the 40s. He opined, "Some producers were growing worried of Loretta's theological bent. I think Loretta had a reputation among the big moguls of being slightly difficult because she was so religioso." Now that's Murray's slang word. "She had a reputation for impinging her beliefs into the stories she was making. I think the reason she went into television is because she could guide the whole thing." Now, in the next podcast, Loretta comes walking through the door. If you're over 70, you know exactly what that means. And if you're not, it will be well explained in the next podcast. So, see you then.